I'm going to talk a little bit more about this whole phenomenon of boys not reading. Mark Bourrie, a very fine Canadian nonfiction writer, has argued that this phenomenon has been happening now for 3 generations. And I'm going to add just a few personal observations, probably around Bourrie's age, by the way. Um, and when I was a teenager, I was extremely bookish. I went to a high school in downtown Ottawa. I had a routine after every day after school. I would sort of wander around to these different bookstores and just enjoy looking at the different books. Sometimes going to magazine smoke shops, as they were called, going to magazine stores and looking at the magazines. Sometimes for purposes of, uh, adult enjoyment. But for the most part, I spent a lot of time in bookstores. I spent a lot of time in libraries. And what I found at that time was that there were not many kids from my high school who had the same habit. I was alone most of the time. Book reading as a, a daily habit or a near daily habit has never been really that common among young boys. I remember when I was in grade 6, several of sort of the popular, slightly jockish boys in my class organized something called the Hardy Boys Book Club. And because they were jocks, it took on um, the whole exercise took on a very sort of jock quality, which was you would take out, we had this little lending library of all our Hardy Boys volumes that we took to the school, and they were all put out on a shelf. And every afternoon, when the day ended, each of us would take one of these Boys books, and then we'd compete with each other as to how quickly we could read them. So there was a kind of competitive atmosphere to it. Reading a lot of Hardy Boys books is going to improve your literary sensibility. But apart from that episode, I didn't find that there were that many boys who were sort of kind of habitually bookish. There were a lot of kids who were reading, and certainly bestsellers were a big deal. When I was in junior high, um, books like Jaws and The Exorcist and The Happy Hooker came out, and uh, there was a small group of boys who'd go to a picnic table somewhere in the playground, and we'd read these books together. Other books like Catch 22 were very big among some of my friends. I remember talking with my friend Glenn about that. With my friend Doug, we used to talk about books. It definitely there was an element of bookishness there, but did it really sort of, in a general sense, reach nerd qualities, the nerd levels? I'm not sure about that. However, obviously, these days, the situation is quite different, and social media has a big impact. Bourrie is arguing that 3 generations of boys, nerdish boys, have lost interest in books. And recall, these are exactly the sort of brainy boys who naturally would be inclined toward reading books. Smartphones have definitely had a big impact. Smartphone technology did not emerge until 2008, and it didn't really take on until maybe the 2010s. So that has only been a factor for maybe 1.5 generations of boys. For the other 2 generations of boys, I don't know what the factor would be. The internet. In any case, one can go around and around and around, sort of thinking of these different kinds of experiences that one has had subjectively. One can make sort of social observations about changes in the culture generally. Uh, but I think one difference between then and now, then being the 1970s when I was a teen, and now being the mid 20s in the 21st century, is that in the 20s, identity politics has become a big driving force in the choices that publishers of YA fiction or the kind of fiction that smart boys would read. Um, I'm speaking about fiction here, and I realize that Bourrie is more interested in nonfiction. But with fiction, identity politics is a big factor. Now, that could be advantageous for a lot of boys, like boys of color. Black kids and Asian kids won't sort of be faced with that implacable whiteness that existed in YA fiction, the Hardy Boys, during the 1970s. But at the same time, I think it's really worth underlining that nerdy boys are their own particular niche. And I think this is a more significant categorization than sort of conceiving of boys in terms of their racial identity. I think there's a big, big difference between a sort of brainy, sensitive kid, especially one who feels very painfully shy with girls. And I think that is a sort of unique category more than racial identity. In other words, a very popular sort of jockish boy who, for example, is black or mixed race is going to have a different adolescent experience than a kid who's a boy who's black or mixed race and is just a little bit withdrawn and painfully shy, and painfully shy because he's not that popular with the pretty girls. So that aspect, that sort of very profound existential experience, which is hard to define, much harder than racial difference, is one that I think book publishing needs to think about more.